Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today I have the pleasure of having my good friend Mike Begg across. And when I say good friend, it's just what a time to be alive. Virtual connections. You're dialing all the way from Mexico. Is that correct?
I am, Ruben. Thank you for having me here. I'm calling in from Guadalajara. So
that's beautiful, man. Well, I have to check that out as well. That's obviously my travel bucket list has kind of come to a halt at the time, but when the smoke clears, I'll definitely put that on my list as well, man. So what's happening, man? Pleasure to come into the lab, but we were just talking about this off the air, and I said we got to get it on the air right away because I always love it when we got a business, one who understands business, and you have an interesting connection to real estate, which is definitely what we're going to start with. But as far as sometimes I just like to ask on the fly, man, like you are obviously running a really, really cool operation as I believe co-founder. Am I correct?
Yes, I am.
And you call it, I want to make sure I say it because I don't know if it's AMZ for sure. Is it Amazon? How did you guys? We're going to talk about the trademark in a little bit. So what do you call your company to give to level set so we can kind of give you the right introduction that you deserve?
We go by AMZ just to avoid any potential issues, but Absolutely. It frequently gets interpreted as Amazon.
See what I did there? Protected you. I was looking out for you. So co-founder AMZ, and it's fascinating. AMZ Advisers. And your story is fascinating. I want to tie it to real estate. But before we do that, I believe your business is a reflection of who you are. So, Mike, what gets you out of bed? We're going to reverse engineer how you got to where you got today. But, what gets you going, man?
Man, I think what just gets me excited the most is just building new things. I'm building my own business with my two partners, but every day I'm helping all my clients build their own businesses in the e-commerce space. So, it's just fun seeing the results, trying new things, testing things, seeing what the result, what happens, what changes, and then just kind of growing from there. And that's really what I enjoy doing.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at my screen here because I got two monitors. So if you're listening to this, I'm coming to you live for some gems. So Mike obviously is being a little, on the, humble side, but Mike's doing some really interesting things. And I want to make sure I read this correctly because you co-founded AMZ Advisors, right? And you have two partners, which you just mentioned. You have a growing team, and that's part of the reason why you went out there, aside from the girlfriend being in Mexico, but you're able to scale out there, which is fantastic. And I mean, you're literally managing over $10 million per year in ad spent, which is crazy because I can say I've only spent around 6 figures a month and I cannot the millions. I mean, that's crazy. And then $100 million per year in Amazon sales. So let that sink in, guys. But let's take a step back into how we even got there. You had an interesting connection with, commercial real estate, a household name. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that connection? I want to see how you were able to kind of make that jump into the company that you co-founded.
Yeah, so there definitely is an interesting connection there. As you mentioned, I was working commercial real estate. I was working for Sears, which was the former retailer. I guess we'll call it that. I think it's still on life support somewhere. I'm not sure, but I was working there in the real estate department doing real estate development, and actually joined when Sears was doing the Seritage REIT spinoff. So that was my first project, was underwriting that, and then I stayed on, did a lot of real estate development from there. It was a tough time. Sears was struggling as a company. We were trying to figure out what to do with the assets, try to monetize them the best way we could, which is why we were looking at redevelopment opportunities or, selling off assets where we could. And there were just a lot of interesting things that I was seeing in a lot of the deals that I was doing and a lot of the interest that I was getting. And also I was learning a lot from the retail side of Sears and actually seeing what was happening in these retail stores year over year, how foot traffic was falling, how sales were falling, and all these things. And it kind of made me start realizing that e-commerce was what was coming. So that's kind of how I jumped into the e-commerce space. It wasn't that, that quick or that smooth, but that was more of the real estate background and kind of how I started going in that direction.
Okay, I'm going to hold you because you said some key gems that I love. So obviously now you're in the lab. So the lab is all about being an experimenter, a practitioner.
Okay.
And what I just heard is key because you were in an environment where you saw something and you got a little bit deep and educated on it. And that's why I always give, a lot of the entrepreneurs, maybe they're side entrepreneurs or they're learning, or like, oh man, I got my job, but there's always some piece of data that you can take. Like I come out from the corporate world as well, but I have a company and I'm looking at their system. So I'm like agile certified. So I'm like, I take that and I'm like, we're going to run agile. We're going to have scrum meetings every day. We're going to do the exact same thing these corporations do because it's data that I can use. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you saw something there, which I honestly, I'm fascinated because we've never had a retail guy on the real estate development. So I'm excited to tap into that so people can kind of see your day to day. So let's get into that. But I really want to just tip my hat towards you for seeing something in your day-to-day job. And then instead of just maybe sitting around and complaining, you're literally taking in data so that you can take it into your own lab. I mean, excuse me for paraphrasing, but I had to put it that way, man. That's what you did, right? Am I correct?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good way to put it. I think on the day-to-day, I was just analyzing different properties, a lot of the boring stuff that comes with real estate, reading leases, reading contracts, all that nonsense, operating agreements, whatever it may be. But every once in a while you see an interesting deal come across or, an interesting tenant reach out to you and you're kind of like, like why is that? And a lot of these instances where, a mall, Sears, for example, has a big box at an end cap in a mall. And we're looking at ways of redeveloping that. So we'd have food retailers or small shop retailers come in and reach out to us and say, hey, like we'd be interested in renting space. So one way we started seeing that, first of all, big box retail isn't really needed anymore, or at least in the mall sense. I mean, I know Walmart, Target, they're still going to be around, but in the mall sense, having everything in a Sears store didn't really make sense. So a lot of times we were knocking them down, repurposing them for smaller retailers. So I think that was one trend that I started seeing is that smaller and smaller retailers are going to be, coming into the space more, whether it be food, whether it be, a physical good, whatever it was. And that was one interesting thing that I started taking out of that, seeing that there was more demand for this type of space for smaller businesses. And I think in general, there was a bigger sentiment around consumers to support small business as well. So I think that's kind of one thing that I started seeing. And then I saw some really interesting big transactions or inquiries, I would say, particularly involving companies like Amazon, like FedEx, and seeing what was happening in that space. So, we had some pretty good offers from those types of companies to buy some of Sears distribution centers so they could actually distribute more inventory. We also saw some other, that was an interesting one. This one's even better. We also saw some other transactions where Amazon was coming in and buying C and D malls and redeveloping the malls into fulfillment centers. Can you,
what's C and D? Can you give us some context so we understand?
Yeah. So it's just the way we think of like what a good quality mall is to like a bad quality mall. So let's say,
so we're talking asset, like asset class.
Exactly. Yeah. So C and D, like obviously poor. I mean, D, everything's probably closed already. C, it's probably trending in that direction. And we had Amazon come in and look to buy a few malls that we were at that were D malls. So we saw some interesting stuff happening in that space. And that's kind of when I started paying more attention to it. Luckily, I had two business partners as well, or my two partners now, that were also interested in e-commerce, and kind of what I was seeing combined with what they were learning in e-commerce really kind of pushed us in that direction.
Oh, okay. This is getting too good. Okay, cool. Slow down for a second. Let's take a step back, Mike. So, okay, partners, were they also at Sears? Because that would be like that'd be like the takeover, like rebellion. Okay, that'd be interesting. Okay, so we level set, but give us some context a little bit too, because I think the timing is interesting. Because if you're listening to this now, where March 1st, we saved this day for Mike to come in on March 1st to kick us to finish off the first quarter. March 1st, 2021. When did you start seeing this transition? At what time period? Or I guess just take us back to when that was, when you were working at Sears. When was that?
2014, 2015.
Okay.
When I was there.
That's interesting. That gives us some context. And where I'm going with this, I want to take a step back because you said the boring stuff, but I think in 2014, this is interesting where you're already seeing these small retailers. But I want to ask a question. Why do you think that was that these big malls were more, I guess, preferential to or I guess more ideal for smaller retailers? You said something about is that what the marketplace wants? Like, I'm trying to understand. I don't think I understood the connection there. Maybe you can give us some insight.
Yeah, I think at least back then, I mean, things have kind of changed over the last year and a half. Is that in a way, experiential shopping was still very important in the retail space, and that's kind of the trend that was going on. So, over the maybe the last 3 years, we saw a lot of weird types of stores or experiential places opening up in malls to try to attract more people. This was a similar concept. So essentially, we would just scrape the pad, take out the big box, rebuild it with if it's in a warm weather place, outdoor shopping area with restaurants and stores right next to each other, to really try to increase that experiential aspect of it, really draw people into the space. Mm-hmm. And then, we can obviously charge a little bit higher on a smaller space rent than we could for a big box.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think it's important that you give us the how the business model works as well, because I'm not even familiar. How are these large? Give us some insight, because we obviously understand commercial real estate, and it has a lot of different aspects and a lot of different ways you can mold it. So this is a great opportunity for us to learn through you for a second here. So the way these big retail companies like Sears, now I'm curious, maybe Walmart's a little different, right? Uh-huh. But does Sears rent out for like a 10-year lease to a big maybe owner, developer? Do they buy it outright? Like, what do they do typically?
So there's actually a lot of interesting stuff there. Sears in the beginning was buying a lot of their stores. They had about, I think close to like 1,500 owned assets across the country. So they had a lot of real estate space that they had bought back in the 50s, the 60s. So I was reading these ancient contracts trying to figure things out, which was kind of cool.
And is that paid off, or is that still on the note?
Yeah, it's paid off. Yeah. All the assets were free and clear. I mean, Sears during that entire time was doing fantastic. So they didn't really have to worry about, financing this stuff.
Yeah.
There was few later refinancing on it to, raise additional capital, but, and, other things that were going on within the company. But anyway, so that was one way they would do it. We did have a lot of leased assets as well that were typically, 10-year terms with 2 or 3 renewal options for 10 years. So there were some leased properties that Sears had for 30 or 40 years at the time. So that was typically the way they approached it back then. And when we talk about a lot of other big box retailers like Walmart or Costco, or those are the two I'm the most familiar with, what they do typically is they do land leases. So they'll do a ground lease for, I don't know, a 50-year or 40-year term, 30-year, whatever it may be. And we'll just provide a scraped site. We'll clear everything off, and they'll build their own property. So that's the way they typically do it. So they're essentially constructing things the way they want. That is the other model that's kind of in the big box space, and I think that's a lot more popular now than it was when Sears was doing a lot of its leases for the stores it has.
Well, can you give us insight on the advantages, disadvantages? Like when are you then renting the lot and you're building what you own? Like, can you help us kind of connect those dots? Because that might be not as, kind of typical for the, the investor, maybe in the multifamily or something. Like, that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think the main advantage is it just comes down to cost per square foot for rent. So, I mean, if you're renting a site that I don't have to prep, or I have a site that I just need to clear, I just need to demolish things, my cost to actually do that is a lot lower. So I can rent it to you for a lot less. If I need to build the entire store for you, if I need to provide tenant allowance, so I give you money to finish the inside, or some other support in that way, it's going to cost me a lot more, and your rent per square foot is going to be a lot higher. So a lot of these big box stores, they operate on a sales per square foot model. So when they're looking at that, if their sales per square foot is X number and they're able to maintain a lower rent per square foot, or in the sense rent per the entire lot, their margin is going to be a lot higher from that standpoint. So that's kind of the advantage to doing it in that model. And then, they build their own store. I mean, they do have that asset in a sense, even though it's a leased property, but now that they own their store and then it's on a ground lease, they could actually release that store in the future if they wanted to. So if you have a 50-year contract on a ground lease, your store goes out of business in 20 years, or you need to close that store in 20 years, you can release that property now.
Wow, interesting. And then is the ground I guess with that, is that when you say we, is that the developers?
Yeah. Yeah, the developers.
Okay.
I throw we a lot, and
No, it's
so if
interesting.
there's ever
I just
confusion, just tell
no,
me.
I just want to make sure we're clear because it's a very kind of a unique business model. So is the developer out of the picture at that point, or is there still some kind of title on that land? Like I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, well, in Sears' sense,
Yeah.
being a developer for Sears, Sears still owns the land, and they're just getting payments for the land. But in some instances, we would actually resell it. So, I mean, if we're talking about, just one deal, I don't remember exactly where it was, but the cap rate on a Costco is pretty good. I think back when we were trading, it was like 5%, which is a pretty good cap rate, and Costco is paying $1 million a year in a ground lease. So a 5% cap on $1 million in NOI is pretty good. So you can actually increase the asset value for really not that much cost when it comes to actually developing the property. And then in some instances we would sell it off. Some instances we would keep the revenue, but yeah, just redeveloping the assets that way is kind of the way we would approach it.
Okay, wow. Thank you for that, because I think that gives you a lot of good context. Now, I want to transition into something that was key, because you probably saw this right before your eyes, and I had another gentleman who you probably know. I think Scott Myers. You may have heard of him.
Not familiar.
Self-storage guy, maybe. Actually, his episode just launched, but I think he was one of the guys who talked about distribution centers, just kind of understanding what's happening right now. Like as e-commerce is growing, you got to ask yourself the question: where are all these things being manufactured? Right, that's where the light bulb goes up, right? Yeah. So talk to us about that transition of like where you kind of saw the big aha, because I know you touched on it a bit, but I think kind of level set and give us that insight of like, do you remember when you started seeing that transition, and can you kind of walk us through, you remember what you were experiencing that was like kind of like, oh snap, it's happening?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I talked about a few of the examples before when we saw, Amazon doing some deals, but in general, there was demand for a lot of other spaces from other big companies like Prologis, which is one of the largest industrial REITs out there, or industrial developers. They had a lot of interest in some of our larger sites to turn into, fulfillment centers or, industrial warehouse space that they could rent out to whoever. So, all of that was kind of going on and kind of playing, making me learn more. And then, it just kind of happened that at the same time, we learned about the opportunity to start selling products on Amazon. And we learned what these Amazon fulfillment centers were doing is that they weren't just selling products that Amazon owned, they were selling other people's products through those fulfillment centers. And that's kind of where the light bulb, switched. It was like, oh, so like we could put our own products in there if we wanted to and start selling them. And from there, it was just constantly consuming content, trying to figure out how to do that. And then obviously going to the manufacturing piece, which is primarily done in Asia or, Mexico where I am, or a lot of other countries that are out there. You're just importing products to the US, putting them in that Amazon, fulfillment center that they repurposed a former mall for. And it's just crazy circle of how you get all the way there. And that light bulb moment of like, oh, I could put my products there and I could, take advantage of that and start reaching a much larger audience on Amazon than I could by ever opening a store. So that was really the breakthrough.
All right, tell us about the ABCs, because I'm aware of it, right? How to e-commerce business as well. We were drop shipping for like 8. We were doing it at pretty large scale. And my business partners actually sold their Amazon business, so I do have some context when it comes to that. So why don't you tell us the ABCs? Because everyone sees the Amazon boxes, they see it, like it's unbelievable now. It's like same day shipping and the whole 9 yards. So help us connect the dots of like what's really happening behind, and tell us about the business model for those of us who are not familiar, because we hear Amazon, we're like, Amazon makes sense, but where's that coming from? And tell us kind of like at a 1,000-foot level overview of how the business model works.
For sure. I mean, there's definitely a few different ways to approach it. I think if you're looking at it from the most simple aspect, it's just being a retailer. So you're buying other companies' goods and you're selling them on Amazon. You're literally just buying whatever you can. You could go into Walmart and buy stuff and turn around and sell it on Amazon if you wanted to. That is just being a retailer. The next step beyond that is becoming an actual brand owner, building your own brand within the platform or just within e-commerce in general. And that's much more complex. I mean, you're talking about developing your own branding, possibly getting intellectual property, finding a manufacturer, shipping products to the US, figuring out how to warehouse them, how to fulfill orders. That's a much more complex process. And I think what the Amazon platform helps you do is it helps simplify a lot of aspects of that. With Amazon FBA, you can have your inventory warehoused. They will fulfill your orders for you. They will handle the customer service. The people are already going there, so you don't need to drive traffic. I mean, you still do, but you don't need to drive as much traffic to your listing because people are already shopping on Amazon. So when we think about what aspects Amazon's able to handle for you, when your focus really shifts to building your brand, which, I mean, the branding itself is a one-time thing. Beyond that, it's just marketing. Yep. Finding your manufacturers, which is product research, getting samples, finding people you trust. That's an important one. And then actually getting the product to the US, and that's using a freight forwarder. So when we talk about what your responsibilities really become as the business owner, it's really marketing and product sourcing. There are specialists that can handle everything else, and Amazon's one of those specialists that handles a lot of the process for you. So if we're talking about something that seems so complex to actually build this all out, it's really not when you realize you just need to focus on certain aspects and just learn how these other pieces help you actually build the brand. So I think that's an overview of the ABCs and how it works, and how you go from start building a brand to actually selling on Amazon. But if we're going to get into details, I mean, we could go real deep into everything along the way.
Now we're tapping into your world, and you're bringing us into your ecosystem. But no, I think it's good to give people some context to see like where you kind of saw the opportunity. And so tell me about your transition, because I'm familiar and at a very smaller scale. Like I said, like, I mean, you're bringing back memories where I remember it was like Chinese New Year, and we had like me and my team, and there was I guess, yeah, they were just not going to fulfill our orders. So man, we had like 8 SKUs, and I was just in the living room, man, like just pumping them out. It was the worst. It was just unbelievable. So I remember like the war stories of kind of doing it at a very much smaller scale. But in your case, what was that first product look like? Because it sounds like now, are you doing was it white label? Was it your own? Like, tell us about that kind of process. And then I would love to kind of hear also some best practice for someone who's looking to kind of even get into the space at this time and age. So tell us about your experience.
Sure. So what we started with was an art supply brand. We saw a really good opportunity there, and we found a good manufacturer. We did a lot of research. We found a lot of different categories actually to start. And we found one product within the art supply. So once we knew the product we wanted, we literally just went on, I think it was 99designs.com, got a designer to come up with a logo for us, which we thought was the coolest thing ever, and like absolutely loved it. And then from there, it was just getting products and testing them. So, the first thing is, how do you find these manufacturers? If you're going to manufacture in China, Alibaba is probably the best way to do it. Alibaba does have other countries in there as well, but China is like the one they're known for. There's other websites called Thompson.net where you can find manufacturers in the US as well as other countries. So finding the manufacturers and kind of, having that first conversation with them, getting to know them a little bit better and see what they're capable of is that process. And I mean, it sounds like you're going to have no idea what you're talking about, but, there's really just a few things you need to kind of get across is that, you're a business owner, that you want this product, you're interested in the pricing, you want to know what the minimum order quantities are, you want to learn about their lead times, about their shipping times, whatever they can do for you, how they recommend shipping it, if they have freight forwarder contacts, all of these different things. And just asking questions like that is going to give you so much more information into the entire process. So for us, we found the manufacturer we wanted to work with. We asked them for all these questions. What was the pricing? What were the minimum order quantities? We asked them for a sample. So they actually sent us a sample from China to our apartment where I was living in Connecticut. And from there, we just kind of tested the product, tried to figure out what we thought of it. We ended up liking it. We ended up going on and placing an order with them. So I think that first order was for about 300 units, which I think came out to about $1,500. So it wasn't a crazy amount of money we had to invest in, but it was significant at the time because I was like 25, I think at the time. So that was, didn't have that much money laying around. But anyways, and then, yeah, the big thing is just kind of getting the money to them. So Alibaba's great for that because you can use trade assurance. You can use their platform to actually escrow the money. So you'll put the money in, 70% will go to the manufacturer in their escrow. You still will hold on to the other 30% until the product's actually completed and it's sent to you. So that's kind of moving through those first processes of, finding the product, talking to them, asking the questions, seeing if the quality is good when they send you the sample, and then kind of figuring out how to get that product actually manufactured with them, or if there's a way for you to work and actually pay them. So that's where I would start off and say that's the first thing you kind of need to figure out.
Yeah, no, and I love what you said about that, because as you're going through that, you're literally learning along the way as well. And you're also interviewing manufacturers, and you get a chance to, oh, this is the language. What did they mean by that? Oh, let me look. Oh, minimum quantity. Okay, got it. Oh, there's a minimum that I could just get one. Right. So like, I think that's why I really enjoy you being on our platform, is if you're being able, you're sharing a process, just like any real estate, just like any business. You have to go through the process and you have to test, which I love. So as far as giving us and one of the things I do want to ask you is, I want to relate this product that you talked about. I know that from experience that there's certain sizes that will also determine how much the fulfillment center is charged by us, and etc. Would you give someone advice to start with something that's a little bit smaller, not oversized, or what are kind of your insights on that? Because I think what we're talking about is these distribution centers, they're storages, and if you take up more space, you'll probably have to pay more. Am I on the right track here, or is that
I think
relevant?
Yeah, exactly. You're completely on the right track. I mean, there are two different approaches of this, and like two different schools on kind of what the good way to do it is. When we're talking about the actual fees, though, when you are selling a product that weighs less than 2 pounds on Amazon, and I think the longest dimension of the product isn't longer than 18 inches, that means your fees are going to be pretty low. Once you get above that, your fees really start increasing. Now, at the same time, when we're thinking about where is the most competition, it's usually in those products, because it doesn't take up there's not a lot of storage fees. They're not going to lose a lot of money on the fees to actually send it. So that's one way to look at it. Another great way to look at it, though, is on larger items, there's less competition. So if you're selling a larger item, depending on how large it is, you might not be able to actually store it at Amazon. Your fees are going to be higher. That's 100% true. But because of that, your price is also going to be higher. So it may actually work out for you in the long run to actually have a bigger product. Or, for me, the ideal situation is having that small product at a high price point, because now your fees are going to be low. Your shipping is going to be low. All of that's going to be pretty cheap. You have a high price point. You should have a good margin. But at the same time, like, high price point, big product, that can also be a great place to get into, because there isn't as much competition, like I said.
Absolutely. So transitioning to where you guys are today, obviously you built a very interesting company. You guys have done it as practitioners, which I love. That's really important. What are you doing now, at AMZ Advisors? What is it that you're doing? Are you being advisors? Are you coaching people? Like, how does that work? I want to kind of hear, and then maybe kind of tell us as well. I want to hear some of your students' kind of wins, and also some of your own as well, to give us some context as to what led you down the path.
Sure. So the bulk of our business is mainly working with companies that are doing between $1 to $10 million online, or that are a good enough size and are serious about investing into the Amazon platform. For us, we can get the best results for companies that are within that, or that are ready to go, ready to give us the advertising dollars to really make it happen. And then we can get the results for them. And what we do is we do everything from helping them get their inventory into Amazon, creating the SEO and the graphic design for their product listing so everything looks good, helping them develop their general marketing strategy, and then actually managing the advertising and helping them get the results and getting more sales. When it comes to coaching, things like that, we don't do that as much. We do have a course where we kind of help people learn a lot of the fundamentals about selling on Amazon that, some people that really aren't there yet, we kind of push them to that. But when it comes to actually, the day-to-day work we're doing, it's really working hand in hand with these clients to make sure that they're getting the best results on Amazon. And one good example of this is one client that I still work with very closely. She joined us 2018, I think. She's still with us. And we took her literally from doing $30,000 a month on the Amazon platform, so $300,000 a year, to doing $3 million a year on Amazon 2 years later. So, it's a process. It's continually testing. It's figuring out the new things, seeing what works, and it's going to happen over time. Once you have a process to actually, scale your advertising, get the best out of your advertising budget, and really grow. I mean, that's just one example. We've helped other larger brands that are, multinational, that maybe aren't on Amazon, come onto the platform and go from 0 to $600,000 a month in sales in 4 to 5 months. So there's different ways to really approach it depending on the company and depending on how serious you are to investing in the Amazon platform.
Yeah, sure. And if I'm sitting with you there, Mike, in a meeting, and I'm like, hey, like, I really want to work with you guys, what's the unique selling proposition that you're really bringing to the table, that you're saying, hey, man, this is what we do, this is what we're good at, just so we get an understanding of maybe who folks who might be able to work out with you guys in the future? How does that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some of our results probably speak for themselves. I mean, $500 million in sales on Amazon has only been done by a couple other companies. Wow. But I mean, when we're talking about the way we do things, you're working hand in hand with one of our consultants. They're there for you 24/7. You can call them, email them with any questions you have, and we kind of help you from that standpoint of it. And we really take a holistic approach on how Amazon fits within your entire e-commerce strategy, because Amazon's just a sales channel. There's Walmart, there's social media, there's all these other sales channels. And if you're focused so much on just growing Amazon to make money, that's never really going to be the long-term result you want. I mean, Amazon, that's great. Like, you're going to make money, but the margin's going to be a lot lower than it will be on other sales channels. So we focus on helping our clients leverage the Amazon platform to really start growing outside of Amazon and building that brand awareness, getting more loyal customers, and then trying to convert them on their own website or building an email list or whatever it may be to help them grow as an e-commerce brand over time.
This is a Digital Assets Thursday series right there. So we have a segment where we literally just talk about digital assets, and I'm so glad you brought it all together, because I just had one of our SEO guys who ended up coming on our show. Shout out to Chris and CEO Ardor, and we were talking about how real estate, it's kind of digital asset. And when you talk about your site, for example, that's a lot of people are leveraging social media platforms, which is great, but you're building your home on somebody else's land, and so I love they brought it full circle, because it really resonated with them. Like, oh dang, that's so true, right? Like we're renting, right? Like we're renting on Facebook, Instagram, like all those things. But it's great. It's a channel, and you should utilize it, and you should leverage it. But it sounds like you're tapping into the entire ecosystem, supply chain management, like the entire overview of the business, and you're just saying, hey, we know this platform very well, and we can help you kind of scale through that. Did I get that right, or am I a little bit off there?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, Amazon's our main focus. We do work on other platforms as well. But when it comes to just where people are going to shop, and the biggest opportunity right now for pretty much every brand, it's on Amazon. I mean, 70% of all online searches for products are happening on Amazon. So if your product's not there, your brand's not there, I mean, just you're losing out.
Well said. So just to put it all together, tying it back to the real estate, and I don't know if your eyes are kind of tapped in, because obviously right now you got your full plate with AMZ Advisors, which is fascinating. It's amazing what you guys are doing. Now, as far as fulfillment centers, right? Distribution centers, like how is that looking like right now? Is Amazon building more, or is Amazon renting from other maybe investors who own distribution centers? Like, I'm just trying to maybe understand the landscape of what we might be in here for tuning into this 2021 March 1st. Like, what's it looking like on the back end? This is a back end question. We don't even get to see that. So I'm counting on you, man. Give us the juice. What's happening? Are you still in the loop with that, or is that
I'm definitely not as in touch as I used to be, but yeah. I mean, if we're talking about the amount of fulfillment centers that Amazon's opening on a month-to-month basis, they're opening about 5 everywhere in the US. So, I mean, if we're talking, that's about 60 a year that they're opening. Primarily, at least the way they were doing it, was through acquisitions. So they were either buying raw land or buying distribution centers and then repurposing them. I think that's still pretty much the case. I don't really think they lease a lot of their assets.
That's interesting. Buying straight cash.
Cash cows.
Hey man, it ain't tricking if you got it. That's what's up, man. Look, this was such a great insight, Mike, and I loved how this is my passion. Like, I mean, business, real estate. I'm kind of a selfish host at this point, but I hope that, and I know it's going to serve a lot of our listeners, because a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs and they love real estate. So I think it gives a kind of an insight as well into what's happening on the back end. But I guess if someone's really listening to this and it really resonated, like, where can they find out more about what you are doing with your team, my man?
The best way is to, either check out our website, amzadvisers.com, or if anyone has any questions about Amazon, about e-commerce, about real estate, I'm always glad to talk. Mike at amzadvisers.com is my email address, and you can send any questions you have there.
We certainly will. If you're driving, keep your hands on the wheel. You already know we will have that in the show notes. But before you leave, Mike, I got to ask you, man, you're doing a lot of interesting stuff. We talked about this off the air. Yeah. What's next for you, man? What are you going to buy Amazon, man? What's next? What's happening, bro? What's happening? What's next for you, man? You've obviously had a lot of great success, which is so refreshing to see and very inspiring. I love that, seeing young entrepreneurs. I'm giving you the young, man. You guys got to see this guy, man. He's looking fresh. He's looking like $1 million. If you're driving, you got to tune into this episode live, even with the COVID haircut. But man, you're doing well. What is next for you and your partners, or even for yourself? Do you see yourself maybe investing? Do you see, what is next? What's next for the company? What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we got going on, as we should be. We still sell products online, so we're still building our own brands, kind of looking at what we're going to do there. One hot trend right now in the e-commerce space is, brand aggregators or roll-ups of all these e-commerce brands. So there's a lot of money right now in that space. So we've talked about trying to sell some brands, possibly even try to find a money partner on acquiring a lot of other brands and kind of pick your own aggregator.
Can you talk about what's a brand aggregator? Because I think people really need to tap into this real quick, man. How are you gonna give a gem right before we close the show? My God, you opened this door for this one. And it's too good. Tell us real quick. Give us a real quick overview. A brand aggregator. What is that?
So if you want to learn more about it, obviously look at Thrasio. Thras.io is their website. But what they do is they essentially purchase other Amazon FBA businesses. So if you're building your own brand, you can sell to a company like a brand aggregator if they like your sales or whatever it may be. I don't know their entire process, if they underwrite the deal right. Yeah. And I mean, you can get money for your brand, and the multiples right now are pretty crazy on it. So lots of money in there. Thrasio has, I think, a $2 billion valuation as an aggregator. So lots of interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah, for all my real estate syndicators listening to this, it's essentially, it's kind of like syndicating, because in a way, like, I know there's a guy, I think you might know him, Kevin something, in the space. They're starting to we'll create an Amazon store for you. You give us the capital, and their entire plan is to do a roll up. Like, it's getting crazy, man, but it's really interesting from a business level. Now you're tapping into something I'm so interested about, which is the roll up strategy, but we'll save that for another time, because that's real business. That's real wealth. And that's real, that's some real powerful stuff, man. Like, if you guys got to tune into it, look into roll up strategies when people are buying businesses. It's genius. And maybe we can leave that for another time. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, it sounds good. I'm always glad to come back and talk more if I can.
He said it. We got him for a second one. All right. Anyways, man, look, well, it'll be a pleasure to have you back into the lab. Guys, make sure we'll have everything in the show notes to go ahead and find out more about what Mike and AMZ Advisors are doing. We're going to keep tabs on these guys, because it seems like they're able to see what's around the corner, and we love that early adopters. So on that note, we appreciate you stepping into the lab, Mike. And just like that, we are out. Mike.